we get closer and closer to the release of the next expansion for Legends of Runeterra, Riot is continuing their tradition of revealing cards every day. Yesterday and today were no exception. I actually did a video yesterday that I didn't publish, and the reason for that was that the cards that were revealed yesterday I really felt like didn't give us enough of a picture to make a good judgment on, and I knew that at least part of the package was also coming today. You can kind of guess what's coming at this point, both because we have had a bunch of information from data mining previously and also just existing archetypes and so on and so forth. So I don't want to spoil too much, other than that I'm still looking forward to Shyvana. But when the cards were revealed yesterday, I knew kind of beyond a shadow of a doubt that today Soraka was going to be revealed. And the cards that were revealed yesterday, I think, depend a lot on other cards. They're going to need some help. And also, specifically yesterday, there was a card that I think is going to end up being pretty polarizing, or at least has the potential to be. It might actually just be an unfounded fear, but landmarks in general are going to be bringing something interesting to Legends of Runeterra, and I want to talk about that at the end of today's video. So we're going to go through the cards that were revealed yesterday, the cards that were revealed today, and then I want to talk about just landmarks and the general design philosophies behind them. So without further ado, we're going to put a graphic up on the screen. Again, shout out to my friend Cosmic, who is a fellow Michigander. He makes these graphics and they are beautifully done, so I'm stealing his. And we're going to take a look at the landmark that has the potential to be troublesome right out of the gate, and that is Starspring. Starspring is a 2-cost landmark, and it says on round end, which is interesting because many of the other landmarks up until this point have been round start. But on round end, you heal damaged allies for 1. Then once I've seen you heal 22 or more damage from allies, you win the game. So we get another alternate win condition that's not named Fiora, and that's nice, and it's on a landmark, and this is very clearly going to be a build around landmark. So you are likely going to be building your deck around healing your units and exploiting that in order to try to win with this. Now you might have alternate win cons in your deck. It's usually good to have a backup plan because this has the potential to be a bit brittle and or not. It's actually, I think, going to be really polarizing. And again, I'm going to talk about that at the end of this video because landmarks in general, I think, will end up being a pretty polarizing mechanic unless we just plain have a lot of landmark tools. But right now I want to focus on whether or not you think that 22 is achievable, because when I first saw this yesterday, my knee-jerk reaction was, this is a meme, there's no way you're going to get 22 healing off. And then I marinated on it a bit, and then I thought, okay, well, I need to see more, because my big concern was that there was no mass healing card. It's very easy to do spot healing in this game, and we've already seen from this expansion a number of tools that actually help this archetype. So I was raving over things like Boxtopus and the Codger, for example, and I was even talking about how you can play those overstated but damaged units early, and then suddenly cards that heal that are often overlooked are combat tricks. Starspring just fits even further kind of into that deck archetype. So I don't think there's going to be a shortage of things to heal, but my big concern was whether or not you'd be able to do it enough, do it often enough, and do it in big enough numbers to hit 22. Make no mistake about it, 22 is a lot of damage to heal. You're basically trying to, this is what it does, and this is why it's actually kind of interesting from a design standpoint. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent, so I apologize, but what this does when it's in play is it changes you from being the like proactive, I want to attack my opponent's nexus, to you're a burn player trying to burn down a nexus, but instead of burning down a nexus, you're healing your own units. But that's essentially all it is. You're turning all your heal cards into burn cards, trying to hit that magic 22 mark. And so you're trying to find ways to exploit healing in as many ways as possible. And there are a number of ways I think you can do that I'll also mention, but it still keeps the game board centric, which I like. It still gives players a lot of decision making potential and potential for interaction, because you can just try to deny your opponent from healing. So if they go to heal a unit and you can kill it in response, you've denied the healing. If they attack and you decide not to block, then you're also potentially denying damage on their units. and that in turn has the potential to deny healing. Now I imagine decks that are based around this are going to find ways to deal damage to their own units. I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. They're also going to try to find ways to exploit that healing, and there's a number of ways to do that. So the first thing that crossed my mind when I was thinking about this yesterday was things like Trundle, because right now in game, other things that kind of care about healing triggers do trigger off of regeneration. So units like Trundle, units like Braum, things with a lot of health and regen help a lot. And they're already in Freljord, which is a fantastic controlled tool for stalling the game. And so a Targon, Freljord kind of control deck that tries to win by Star Spring very well could be a thing. Now, there's also a number of things we're going to talk about as far as like cards that do the healing, and that includes future reveals here. So I'm going to actually leave that for later, but ways to generate more healable targets. So I think about things like Dawn and Dusk, for example. You might see weird combo decks where if it's not Dawn and Dusk, it might be something else, where you're trying to make a really damaged unit and then make copies of it and then fully heal them all, for example, or heal them for a bunch. And that very well could be a path. So Star Spring, I think, will prove that you can actually hit that 22 mark. And that was my concern at first. Now, the question again is going to be whether or not it survives long enough to get there, because it has to see the 22 healing, and that's a pretty big deal. So, next card. Speaking of surviving, right after Star Spring, they show off Divergent Paths. Now, this is one of those cards that goes from like being mediocre to being insane in certain matchups. This is a 3-cost fast spell, and it says draw a landmark or destroy a landmark. So paying 3 to draw a card is usually not very good. It does help that you get to draw a specific card type. Most of the landmarks we've seen thus far have been very utility focused or kind of build around focused, and as such, this will end up probably functioning a lot more like a tutor in the decks that run it. So it does have some value there, but paying 3 to destroy a landmark is really good, because this is the cheapest we've seen thus far a destroy a landmark option be. Paying 3 to, you know, blow up the ARAM landmark that was recently revealed, or, you know, the other ones that, because let's be honest, most of them, with the exception of Star Spring, have costed at least 3 or more. So in terms of your like mana to tempo ratio, this is usually going to be a net positive, right? So if your opponent is spending 5 or they're spending 7 to play a landmark, and then you spend 3 to answer it, you kind of come out the winner in terms of resources spent. Now, Star Spring obviously is the lone culprit, but because Star Spring is very likely to be their primary win condition in a Star Spring deck, I think that you're okay with paying 1 more to just stop them from winning. So yeah, Divergent Paths I think will end up potentially seeing play in decks that want to tutor for landmarks and decks that want an answer for landmarks. And since we still don't have a full picture for exactly how many landmark interaction tools we're going to have, it's hard to say if this one is going to make the cut or not, but it's my favorite, I think, thus far of the ones that has been revealed. So next up, out of cards revealed yesterday, I'm going to try to speed this up a bit because I want to get to the stuff revealed today as well. 3-cost 3/3 is Spring Guardian. When I'm summoned, create Spring Gifts in hand. Spring Gifts is a 1-cost slow spell, fully heal an ally. This card has a lot of potential, especially in something like a Star Spring deck, if you are trying to turbo buff their health. So there could be a fun combo deck where maybe you pair Targon with Demacia, who naturally has a lot of buffs, and there is the card where you like double the attack and health of a unit. So you make something with a lot of health, and then you double it, and then you fully heal it, and you're suddenly like halfway to triggering Star Spring. And Spring Guardian would be a good part of that game plan, because you get a body and you get a great tool that gets you towards your win condition. That's pretty much it. That's enough said. So that was it for the cards revealed yesterday, and now we're going to talk about the ones that were revealed today. So I'm going to change the graphic now. So today we got Soraka revealed along with a couple of other cards, and again, Soraka was what I expected to show up today, and that's exactly why I wanted to wait to talk about the healing stuff until today. Soraka is a 3-cost champion with a 1/6 stat line, so a lot of health, not a lot of attack. She's still chucking bananas, but obviously they just kind of tickle. So 1/6 stat line, and her text reads, support, heal me and my supported ally 4. So unless she's down to 1 health remaining, she basically fully heals herself. And in the early stages of the game, when you're playing this 3-cost unit, let's be honest, probably up until like 6-cost units or later, this 4 health is likely topping them off, right? So you attack with her, you attack with another unit, and you're getting healing triggers, which will hopefully help you with your landmark win condition, but also it helps you to level her up. So she levels up when you have healed damaged allies 4+ times. Now it is worth noting, this does not say I've seen you heal damaged allies 4+ times. So I truthfully believe that her level up condition will be very easy to trigger in decks dedicated to doing it. So her leveled up version, standard +1/+1 in the stats, so she becomes a 2/7. The first time you heal a damaged ally each round, draw a card, so she helps keep the resources up and running. And that's really important in a deck dedicated to healing, because sometimes your hand is going to be clunky. If you got a bunch of heal stuff and nothing to heal, that feels bad. If you've got a bunch of units and no healing, then it all goes to waste. So you really do need to keep the resources flowing in a deck like this. And then still has the support, but now it just straight up is fully heal me and my ally. So by the time that you're hitting the late game, if 4 wouldn't be enough, then it is now fully heal. Her spell, and again, it's pretty standard that these spells are playable by themselves as well, but then the champions turn into these. So her spell is Soraka's Wish. 3-cost slow spell, but fully heal damaged allies. And this is the card that I was waiting for, and this is the card that I thought that landmark needed to be viable, because now you can do crazy things. You can make a big giant unit and get it really low in health, and then use like Dawn and Dusk to copy it, and then you play Soraka's Wish and you heal like 18, right? If you've got something damaged for 6 and then you do the Dawn and Dusk and Soraka's Wish combo, so yes, it is requiring a lot. I hear what you're saying, but if you do this, then you heal for 18 in one big swing, and that gets you most of the way to triggering that landmark. And so the window that the landmark needs to be on the board in a dedicated kind of combo-y list, it actually might be much smaller. And that's really important, because this list is basically going to come down to, does your opponent draw the answer for your landmark? I really feel like that's going to be the case. And so the less turns it's on the board, the better, because that's less turns your opponent has to potentially find an answer. And if they've already found their answer, then there's nothing you could do anyway, so you just got to play another one and try to go for your combo. But this card is huge. This card, and again, in my opinion, will be a big part of whatever combo deck that landmark tries to run. Now, whether or not it's going to be viable, who knows? That is a different story, because you need a lot to go your way. You've got to play units, you've got to damage them, you've got to heal them, and you have to keep yourself alive along the way. So I think that this is the sort of list that actually could be cheeky against potentially opposing control decks, but against dedicated hard aggro, who knows? If there's enough flexible healing where you can heal your units or your nexus, and all you do is just kind of stall the burn decks out, stall the aggro decks out until you stabilize, maybe it is fine against aggro. This is too early to tell. That will take testing, but this card makes the combo versions of the deck possible, and so I'm very excited to see it just to support the archetype. Now, that being said, there were 2 other cards that were revealed, so we're going to hit those now. Astral Projection was one. This is a 4-cost burst spell. You heal an ally 4 and grant it +0/+4. This card is also really good for this deck because it does 2 things you want. You want healing, check, and you want to buff toughness up because all of these things that fully heal your allies, well, you know, the more damage they are and the higher their toughness are, the better off you are. And if you're, again, playing this, if you're doing like a Targan Freljord deck, making Trundle's health big, making Braum's health big, those are also big pluses. So Astral Projection does what you would want a deck like this to do. And then the other card that was revealed is Stargazer, and this one is interesting. This is a 4-cost 3/4, but when you heal a damaged ally, you give it elusive this round. This is potentially the alternate win con that I was talking about, where sometimes you're just not going to win with your landmark. You need to have a backup plan. Maybe this is it. Maybe this says, okay, I'm just going to take all the units that I was healing and, you know, go unblockable with them and shove them down your throat. Whether or not this ends up making the list, I don't know. We're going to have to see what the full package is like, but this is at least a potential tool in the toolbox, and I think that is really important. And now that we've covered the reveal cards, I want to talk a bit more about landmarks and why I think they could be really potentially polarizing design. If you're coming from the Elder Scrolls Legends, this is going to sound really familiar. And if you're not coming from that game, maybe you're coming from Magic the Gathering, and there are some similar examples there as well. And what I'm about to talk about is that landmarks being a new card that your opponent might have to answer, and specifically these are new cards that do not engage in combat. They're going to require their own cards to stop. They create this new mini game within Legends of Runeterra, and it potentially polarizes certain matchups. So we have seen many landmarks thus far, and it might just end up being one per region, but so far design wise, most of these have been kind of build around cards, with the exception of, you know, the deep one is like a supplement to an existing archetype, but most of the other ones are like, here's this cool thing, build a deck around it in some you know, way, shape, or form. And that's really cool. That's fun. And so you want to take your landmark and build a deck around it. And so now the answers to landmarks have to be flexible, that certain decks want to consider including them, because if they aren't, if the landmark cards, as far as like removal goes, if the landmark destruction cards are not attractive enough to consider running in a general deck, you create this scenario where if I'm jumping on the ladder and I'm playing, like, let's just say I'm playing an aggro deck, I have to make the decision of, do I want to run something that potentially deals with a problematic landmark, or do I want to just focus on my avenue? And then every deck has to ask this question, whether it's mid-range control, etc., etc. Do I respect landmarks enough on the ladder in terms of power and frequency to warrant putting these cards in my deck? And that's the key, because if landmark decks are really popular, then it's a no-brainer. You just put some landmark removal in because you expect to see it every game. But what if I only expect to see like a really problematic landmark once every 5 games, once every 6 games? And further, let's talk about like Divergent Paths, for example. What if I'm not running landmarks in my own deck and I'm running, you know, Targan and some region that might not have good landmark removal as well? Do I run Divergent Paths to answer somebody's Star Spring, even though I'm not going to ever draw my own landmark? Probably not. I mean, that doesn't sound great to me. But then if I run into a deck running Star Spring and I have no answer, like, my chances of winning just plummeted pretty hard because I can't stop their primary win condition. And so you create this kind of weird polarizing outcome where decks that have adequate access to landmark destruction do really well against landmark decks, and decks that don't have adequate answers will potentially struggle. It's going to depend again on how powerful the landmarks are, how good the other game plans are of those decks. There are multiple variables, but I just think about my time in the Elder Scrolls Legends where there were certain deck archetypes that if they ran into, there's a deck called Support Mage, and it is what it sounds like. That deck ran a ton of supports, and the supports were the win con, and it used them. Supports in that game were very much like landmarks in this game. No great value up front, but the longer they were on the board and the more long-term value they got, the more you snowballed your lead essentially. And landmarks so far in this feel very similar, where the longer they're on the board and go unanswered, the more value the player is going to get out of them. And so, you know, if it's on the board for a turn or two, it's not a huge deal. But if they start getting, you know, 5, 6, 7 turns worth of value, that ended up being an insane investment for them. And so you're going to have these, potentially anyway, these scenarios where folks play landmarks and they either are playing against a deck that has a nice, easy, cost-effective answer and they answer it, or they don't. And then it really shifts the win percentages on either of them. And it goes both ways. Like if I'm playing a Star Spring deck, but I happen to queue into, let's just say there's some region combo that, because their landmark removal is so flexible and they can also use it to kill units, or maybe it's also part of their game plan. Maybe they run 6 to 9 landmark removal cards. If I'm playing a Star Spring deck, I probably just lose. And so it's really polarizing in the other direction as well. And so that happened a lot in the Elder Scrolls Legends. There have been times historically. Now, Magic has the benefit of having been around for almost 30 years now, and they have been able to learn from their mistakes and provide a lot of different avenues to combat things. Magic also has a sideboard, blah, blah, blah. Like, Magic is a different beast, but historically, there are examples that exist of certain card types against certain colors being unanswerable. So if you go, you know, way back to the beginning, and for those who don't know, Magic was very much like the Elder Scrolls Legends. Elder Scrolls Legends has attributes, Magic has colors, Legends of Runeterra has regions. But they all have these things where, you know, you combine them to make decks, and each region or color or attribute has its own identity. And that means they're good at some things and bad at others. And in the case in Magic, Black, for example, historically has always struggled to destroy enchantments. And in the first couple of sets in Magic's history, they had no way to destroy enchantments. They had to include some artifacts to get it done. And even then, they weren't necessarily always cost effective for whatever the problem was. And speaking of the problem, if you were playing like a mono black aggro deck, and then you played against a player that was running white, and they played an enchantment named Circle of Protection Black that can just prevent the damage from a bunch of black sources, you just lost, right? It was a very polarizing matchup because they played a card that you have no way to answer, and it shuts you down. And I don't think that the landmarks here are as poorly designed as Circle of Protection Black was, and I don't think they're as polarizing in their nature, but they are very similar so far, at least the ones that I've seen, to the supports in the Elder Scrolls Legends. And I just go back to my experience in that game. And again, Legends of Runeterra is a different game from Tessel, but there's been some things that I've seen that occurred in Tessel first, and then when I saw them in Runeterra, the exact same outcome occurred, excuse me. Nab is a great example. When I saw the cards previewed for Nab, there's a video of me saying it, and I talked about Thieves Guild Shadowfoot, and I said, hey, Thieves Guild Shadowfoot players hated in Tessel, and there was just one card that did it, and it was not a very popular card, and it still got insane hate on Reddit and other forums. And so when Nab came out, turns out it was a very unpopular mechanic, and there was a lot more cards that did it. And you know, I was right, and it was one of those cases where I didn't want to be right, and I don't want to be right this time. I hope I'm wrong. This is one of those times I genuinely hope I'm wrong. I think that there is a way for landmarks to be interesting and still also have non-polarized matchups and allow for interactivity, and I hope they find that nice sweet spot. But I just need to acknowledge that there is a scenario that potentially exists where if the landmark removal is not attractive enough, decks will not run it, and then quote unquote landmark based decks might profit off them. But then if landmark based decks become too popular on the ladder, then folks might start shoehorning them in, and then you'll have this like ebb and flow depending on the meta. But what you just don't want at the end of the day is a polarizing matchup where if I'm playing deck X and I queue into deck Y and I say to myself, I have no way to deal with landmarks, I can't stop their win condition, and I feel like I've lost before the game has started. That's ultimately what you don't want. So, you know, if it sounds like I'm complaining or anything, I'm really just more concerned for player experience, and I trust Riot to get it right, but this is just my cautionary tale as we go into this set, just like it was my cautionary tale with Nab. So if it's not right out of the gate, give time Riot to get it right. Again, I trust them, but that is something to look out for. And when you go to deck build in the first couple of weeks of this expansion, also keep that in mind. Keep in mind, you know, how popular are landmark decks on the ladder. If they're really popular, you might want to consider making sure you've got a way to interact with them. And then the other way around, if they're not very popular, maybe consider trying to run them, because people might not have a way to remove them. And if they're not popular because the removal is all very flexible and abundant, well, then just avoid them, because you're probably just going to lose with them. But that's it. I'm done ranting now. I swear I'm done. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. I love reveal season. Can't wait for this expansion to come. And until next time.